Hello and welcome to the CX Files for July 31st, 2025. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal. Mark, great to catch up with you. And I'm glad that you caught me now to do this introduction for the podcast because I was actually out gardening and just getting a little bit of sunshine, doing decorations in the yard and so forth. So this is a nice break, a nice respite.
Nice to catch a bit of sun while you can. I know that everybody in Canada takes advantage of it the moment that you do actually catch some.
It is, and it's funny because here in Canada, we've been seeing a lot more extreme heat in the summertime. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we were in fact, Eastern Canada was one of the hottest places in the world. We were topping 45 degrees Celsius. It was very difficult to be outside, very unpleasant for anybody who was working outside. Now we're in the mid 20s. That's my sweet spot.
Yeah, I have been down into Death Valley when it was over 40, and I got talking to one of the national park rangers, and he said, "Yeah, Americans don't tend to come here at this time of year. That they go to more sensible places like up north, but they welcome the foreign tourists unless they kind of get out of the car and try to go hiking in that kind of temperature."
Yeah, you've got to be careful. And talking about hiking, I don't know if you caught that video that popped up on YouTube. It was from a Canadian news broadcast where a couple was hiking around Calgary here in Canada, and it was like a city trail, and all of a sudden they found themselves being stalked by a grizzly bear. It was absolutely terrifying.
Wow.
And they didn't have bear spray. This is something you actually need when you go out to wilderness, or I guess now even urban wilderness in Western Canada. And what ended up scaring the bear away was they, as they put it, made themselves big and jumped up and down and made noise, and the bear just turned around. So anybody who's interested, worth checking out.
Yeah. Well, they were certainly not going out on a bear hunt anyway.
Definitely not. No, they were just going out for a stroll. Anyway, Mark, we have got an amazing, amazing interview today that I cannot wait to talk to you a little bit about. Now, I think one of the big things that you and I have discussed over the years is the extent to which we see so many outsourcing firms that are not necessarily focusing on where they could be optimizing their resources in order to make themselves relevant to the marketplace. And this had been bothering me for quite some time. I was thinking to myself, what is happening in our sector? Why are we seeing so much mile wide and inch deep approach? So I caught up with Amanda Quinn. Now, Amanda is one of the most interesting people I've met in quite some time. She's the founder and the principal of Quinn Growth Advisors. And effectively, what she does is she tries to help BPOs, or she does help BPOs, figure out the right commercial path in order to be more relevant in the marketplace, to get the right visibility in the marketplace. And it's not just from an optics standpoint. Amanda gets into the nitty gritty. She gets under the surface and works with her clients to really identify where their sweet spots need to be in order to align with what's going on in the market. We talked a little bit about some of the trends that we've seen with BPOs on their websites claiming that they are going to be all things to all clients, that whatever service you're looking for, they're going to offer it. Mark, you and I both know that this approach rarely works. And what ends up happening is you see so many different organizations from the provider side being able to potentially do a lot of different things, but not do anything very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly have seen this regarding IT outsourcing as well, being combined with BPO. So where a BPO needs a tech stack, cloud system, and other technology, the BPO claims to be the expert in all of this technology as well. So it's not only that they're claiming to be an expert in energy, utilities, retail, e-commerce, and just about every different industrial sector, but they also say that we can do the AI and the cloud technology as well. And you get that kind of like promise that they can do everything for you. But then you either find that they don't do it very well, or they're just subcontracting it out to others anyway.
And I think this is part of the problem that so many BPOs have found themselves in. You eventually will get a client or a few clients that want to take advantage of all these different services, and then they're left scrambling. And as you say, that word subcontracting, contracting out, it pops up, and that's the only way to go forward. What I love about Amanda's approach is that she takes it from the angle of find a few things that you're going to do really well, get that depth in terms of what services you can provide and the subject matter expertise, and the rest will follow. And as an organization gets better at perhaps two to three different functions, verticals, whether it's a technology as well, then you can start looking at expanding outward. But as it stands right now, for any BPO that's looking to make a splash in the market, they need to do so. They need to approach this from the perspective of being, as I would say, niche focused as they can, as opposed to trying to be all things to all different clients. So what I'm going to suggest is let's go over to the interview I conducted with Amanda Quinn and find out a little bit more her perspectives on how outsourcers need to be rethinking how they position themselves in the marketplace. Well, the CX Files is delighted to welcome a first-time guest today. I am really pleased to be joined by Amanda Quinn, who is the founder of Quinn Growth Advisors. She joins us from her offices in North Carolina. Amanda, great to see you.
Great to see you, Peter. Thank you so much for having me.
Delighted to have you, and I can't believe that we haven't crossed paths previously. You know, the reality is it's a small industry. There's lots of events, and usually you're able to connect one-on-one with people. But we did have the chance to talk a little bit 2 or 3 weeks ago on Zoom, just a little bit about what you're up to. And I find it really interesting the insight that you bring to the table when it comes to what outsourcers are doing well and what they might want to think about a little bit differently. And that's going to be the basis for our chat today on the pod. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Quinn Growth Advisors and what you bring to the market?
Sure. So, Quinn Growth Advisors is a boutique consulting firm. We help BPOs differentiate, modernize, and grow more efficiently and consistently. I came into this industry about 6 years ago, and my kind of fresh eyes perspective on the industry was a bit of surprise at how most BPOs position themselves and approach go to market, because it's so different than every other industry, and the best practices that have really been established for go to market strategy. And so seeing that, I just realized I think a lot of BPOs are kind of stuck in the 1980s in terms of how they think about themselves and growing their business and their growth strategy. And I really want to help them modernize and help them get caught up and develop a more consistent path to growth. And so that's why I formed my company. I'm really passionate about it. I really want to see BPOs succeed in this new landscape.
You probably saw me smile when you referenced Stuck in the 80s. So that is the name of my favorite podcast of all time. And I am very much a person who was stuck in the 80s, but I also recognize that from a business standpoint, we can't atrophy, we can't be Luddites. So I think the energy that you bring to our space is really important. And you referenced something a couple of seconds ago, and that was a fresh set of eyes. And I really believe that this is essential for the BPO space because as somebody who's been in the sector for 22 years, I think we can be myopic. And I think that we can look inward and think the way we've always done it is the way that we always should do it. And nobody evolves that way. But what it also brings to the table, and this is what I want to get into with yourself today, Amanda, is that idea about what outsourcers need to do differently. Now, when we chatted a few weeks ago, you proposed an idea that I've long been promoting, and that is the idea about not necessarily an outsourcer trying to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, which I think we can all agree is something that so many of these organizations do. But would you agree that this is just not succeeding in today's market?
It's absolutely not succeeding. When you think about who your buyer is, the buyer is a conservative, meaning that their career decision is on the line for the outsourcing firm that they choose. right? So they want to choose the firm that gives them the highest likelihood of success, that they feel like they can trust with their business, the fastest, the quickest, the easiest. And when you think about being a generalist, that's the antithesis of being able to create that trust and to show that nervous buyer that you're the right fit for them. And so that just leads to BPOs. What the obvious call to action is BPOs need to be really focused on how they can specialize to become an expert at solving a given problem for a given target market. And so that's really what I counsel my clients to do.
But it's interesting because so many outsourcers, especially legacy ones, have had the view that when you click on our services section of their menu, that you are literally going to see almost like a takeout restaurant menu with like 100 different choices, and that you can pick and choose the one you want. So what would you say would be the advantages that a BPO would get if they were to take that takeout menu and reduce 100 different food and beverage options down to maybe 10 or 15?
Yeah, you're totally right. That's exactly what they do. And I kind of akin it to almost like going to a diner. You know, when you go to a diner and you see their 20-page menu, as a consumer, you know that nothing on that diner menu is probably going to be that great. Or maybe it's like the patty melt that you have in this is our classics. You know, there's like the little section of these are the things we're good at. But in general, you're assuming that the veal parmesan that diner serves is not going to be the best stuff. And so that's the message BPOs are sending when they have that list of services and that list of industries that they serve that is super comprehensive. You're saying you serve everybody. And the implicit thing that you're also saying is we don't really serve them that well. Because how can you develop really good processes and really deep knowledge of a given industry, of a given client's problems, of what they're struggling with, be proactive? That's what when I've talked to buyers, that's the number one thing they say. They want BPOs to be proactive. And how can you be proactive when you're just learning? You're kind of just trying to figure out as you go. And so that's the reason why I say, think about the diner menu versus when you go to a nicer restaurant and there are 6 things on the menu. Like, you know that menu is going to be wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And it's almost as you were describing that, the thing that came to my mind was so many BPOs now are a mile wide and an inch deep. You know, you might be able to provide all these different services, but at the same time, what's that depth of knowledge like? It's not going to be great. You can't do it. It's just too hard. And I tend to think that so many outsourcers have felt up until recently that they need to take that mile wide, inch deep approach, yet they can have all these different choices. But imagine some of those choices, almost like the diner reference. If somebody orders one of the more obscure ones, they're going to go crazy because they're not going to know how to satisfy that need.
No, and that's when you get clients that come in and churn, and then you burn your reputation. You're scrambling to figure out what the recruiting profile of that for an agent of that kind of campaign is. You're struggling to get your team caught up from a knowledge perspective and trained on what they need to do. Yeah, it's a ton of operational overhead. And I think that gets missed, or it's like not included in the mental calculus that BPOs have when they think about who they want to serve. Because when you get really clear at, we're only going to do a certain amount of types of clients, or we solve certain problems, your operations get so much more efficient. Your ability to get really dialed in on the right candidate profile gets better. Okay, I've learned, I thought that this was the profile of the agent I needed, but actually what I've uncovered is that those folks are very customer centric, let's just say, but this type of campaign requires something totally different. We really need someone that can think critically and on their feet, as an example. And so being able to work on the same problems over and over again gives BPOs a chance to get really good at solving those problems. And then they can communicate that from a sales perspective in every conversation that they're having with prospects, to really lead with educating that prospect about their problem, about what they observe from working with their competitors, you know.
Yeah.
And that's really what I advise and how I help my BPOs clients get really take this to the growth perspective too. Like, how does this look from a sales and marketing perspective when you're changing your focus and becoming more focused and leading with your insights instead of just all of your plethora of capabilities?
So let's assume that I'm a BPO leader, I'm a BPO executive, and I've come to you to talk a little bit about getting this more streamlined, depth, subject matter expertise approach. Where should I start as this outsourcing leader in regards to finding what niches I should be going after? What do you see as the easiest pathway or the path of least resistance to getting to that level of granularity we're talking about?
Yeah, the way I approach it is I do a combination of internal stakeholder meetings and having conversations because I want to hear from obviously the executives. They have a hunch probably about where they feel like their secret sauce is, what types of campaigns their teams are best at working, and they can hire the easiest and they have the most longevity in case studies. But maybe operations feels differently. Maybe sales feels differently. Maybe HR feels differently. So I weigh in all those perspectives to kind of help get a hypothesis. That's really what this is. It's kind of like scientific method. It's what's our hypothesis on where we want to go? And then we turn it to ask the clients. I want to hear from the clients. I want to understand from these areas that we feel like have potential. Who's viewing you as a strategic partner? Who is viewing you? Who has the most potential to be able to withstand an AI adoption? So if what you're doing is all just tier one, as an example, or appointment setting, something that we know has a high likelihood of being automated away in the coming years, like I want to see that there's potential for you to be able to go deeper into those client relationships. And if there isn't, then that's a good indicator that that's not a great area for you to specialize. And so it's kind of the combination of looking at your team's special sauce with how the strength of the client relationships and what the clients are saying they're looking for, plus also the broader market. Where's the market headed? Is this a dying industry? Is this a growing industry? Are there going to be are there opportunities to become a more value added partner in those industries? Those are all kind of some of the facets that we look at to help arrive at that hypothesis.
And I love, by the way, when you said hypothesis, that gave me the cold sweats. It made me think of like grade 10 chemistry, which was not a good experience, but that's why
I'm with you. I'm not a science person either.
Yeah.
I totally, yeah.
But
it's like we're dabbling here.
We're dabbling, exactly.
Yeah,
That's exactly it. But listen, I think that you used a term there, facets, that I think is really important, because as long as I've been studying the BPO industry, as long as I've been researching outsourcing, it's always come to my mind that there's about 4 or 5 different silos that outsourcers bring to the table. It can be linguistics. It can be functions. It can be subject matter expertise around verticals. You mentioned different technologies. That's an aspect too. So how can BPO leaders best triangulate, if I can use that expression, some of these different elements, some of these different facets that they bring to the table to make sure that they get a compelling niche offering in maybe 1, 2, or 3 different areas? What would you counsel an outsourcer, whether it's the CEO or, as you mentioned, the operations team, the commercial teams, the delivery teams? That would be a really interesting rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, sure. So just positioning from like a marketing perspective is what problem do you solve and for whom? So kind of your function and vertical combo. So where I generally start is there. Like, where are you finding success? And then we can layer on the linguistics. If that's I don't think that's a long-term competitive advantage. So I probably wouldn't, that would probably be a more subspecialization almost. The technology piece, I view it as a way, my perspective is the future of BPO will be a hybrid of human plus technology. It's going to be whatever, that's all going to be part of your delivery. And BPOs are actually going to look more like consulting firms. That's where I would like them to go, where they get really good at solving a given problem or a bunch of problems for a given market, or a problem for a bunch of related markets. That's kind of how I view it starting. So for small BPO, let me finish that straight of thought. And then the way that they solve those problems is a combo of humans plus technology plus process and whatnot. They bring all of that to bear. But to answer your question, I think the way I've kind of wrapped my mind around this is there's almost like a maturity curve to specialization, where if you're, and it depends on the size of the market too, but if you're a smaller BPO, and let's just say I classify that at below 500 seats, you probably are you can probably specialize into like a niche of a given problem for a given vertical. So maybe that is e-tail, like for e-tailers, we do customer support and upselling, like online customer support and upselling. Maybe that is our revenue cycle management for dermatology practices. It could be very specialized like that. As you break into that and you hit the whole point of you kind of penetrate that market, you're going to hit a cap and you're going to want to know, where do I go next? The easiest way to go from there is to figure out if that current market has additional services you could sell to them. So if you're doing for e-commerce, let's just say if that's who your clientele is, could you be doing accounts payable and accounts receivable for them? Could you add on other functions? Maybe you're doing SDR support for them. Or you can add related industries. So that could, that often is like, if you're in telecom, related industry could be utility and energy, could be government, things that are more rigid, have a lot of processes. There's a lot of embedded knowledge involved. And so either those are kind of the two natural ways to expand as you kind of get to that mid-tier BPO. And then the huge guys, the enterprise BPOs, they're going to be working across multiple domains, multiple verticals, multiple functions, obviously, but they're going to really need to be focused on how they can develop internal processes and proprietary IP that really makes them excellent at solving, being a platform almost for given companies in a given vertical of a certain size.
So here's a question for you. This is sort of came to me as we were chatting. I'm a BPO, whether I'm a smaller one or a mid-sized player, and I don't have experience in a certain niche, but I see an opportunity. What would you counsel an organization, outsourcing organization, that wanted to break into domain expertise that they just didn't have? Is this doable?
It is doable. It takes a concerted effort, and I'd say that team needs to almost have like we called them when I was in technology, like a tiger team, like spin up a different team that's going to be working on this, because you can't compete. You don't want your internal resources competing with this new opportunity, spending their time on the new opportunity, and having that compete with your bread and butter, what's going to bring in your revenue, right? So you don't want it to be a distraction. What they want to be doing is reaching out to the market. They want to be learning, absorbing as much as they can. What I counsel is to be trying to set up as many, I call them market research interviews, buyer interviews, but I want to talk to prospective buyers in that space to really understand what's going on, what's the language they're using, how do they view the problem, what are they struggling with. All of that will really be great fodder for and provide great insights for us to do outbound campaigns, to continue actually testing this, to see if we can land something. It's going to be a slow process unless you have someone that can make an introduction and get you in front, because we know case studies tend to be often for many firms a make or break kind of point in the decision-making process. And so the fact that you won't have a case study will be difficult, but you can overcome that if you can hire somebody on your team who has operationally served that industry or served campaigns like that.
Okay, Amanda, last question. And I'm going to take this from the perspective of somebody working on the commercial side of the business for an outsourcer. And You referenced long-term and long-term vision a little while ago. Unfortunately, I think our sector has become excessively near-term in its outlook. And all I keep hearing is we've just got to get to the end of the quarter. We've just got to make the quarter's numbers. Nobody is thinking what needs to happen over the medium to longer term, which is unfortunate because strategically we're missing out if we're just looking from the standpoint of every 3 months. So if I'm on a commercial team and I'm hearing that my BPO is going to be looking to go more granular, more niche, more in-depth, are there limits to that? Are they potentially going to miss out on other opportunities that might go beyond the 2 to 3 silos that they're going to be going after? And again, that goes back to that jack of all trades, master of none. But would an outsourcer, at least in the near term, be missing out on potential deals or potential opportunities that might be peripheral to what those areas of subject matter expertise and niche that we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is something I hear all the time. It's like the number one pushback I get from BPOs is like, I don't want to niche down. This makes sense. Intuitively, it makes sense, but I'm scared about losing opportunities.
Yeah.
And so what I counsel is when we think about your go-to-market strategy, that's where your team is spending their time and their focus. If you happen to get an inbound lead that is in a different space, absolutely take it. In the short term, take it if it fits a hole in your portfolio. If you need to get this, take it. What I encourage you not to do is do not swivel your entire organization to try to get others like that one, because that is what I see often, that they're like, we now have one in this industry. Let's do a bunch of outbound to try to get others. And it's a massive, shiny ball syndrome kind of problem. And it's such a distraction. And so, I encourage BPOs to really get focused, think long term. And this applies to, we didn't even talk about like AI and technology, but a lot of BPOs I'm talking to are really trying to figure out what their AI strategy is and how they want to leverage tech. Think about how much easier that decision is when you know who you're serving.
Yeah.
Oh, now I know what kind of technology stack I need to be implementing. Now I know who I need to partner with. Now I know how I can start thinking about how to monetize this instead of just trying to have one provider that I try to shove into all my various clients' campaigns, even though it may not be the best fit for them.
Yeah. And when you mentioned that whole AI technology piece, one of the things that I think you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago is the fact that so many outsourcers are literally branding themselves as AI companies and throwing as much spaghetti against the wall to see what's going to stick. And very little of it actually is. And this race to almost position themselves as the leading AI players in the market would be probably a hell of a lot easier if they were to take a niche approach and understand what verticals and what functions they need to be thinking about and invest strategically, not just in the tech, but in the partnerships and the human resources needed to make this work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then even think about the ability, because I've talked to 2 BPOs in the last 24 hours about this problem. They're doing work for free that is value added work that they should be charging for. But this is where like the evolution, like crawl, walk, run of this should be, once you start getting really good at solving a given problem, now I'm going to start doing customer journey mapping for my e-commerce solutions and e-commerce clients rather. And I'm going to charge you, instead of the $12 rate that I normally charge for my agents, that's $35 an hour. And that's a project that is X amount of dollars, whatever, one time. And so you can start, and now I'm going to implement this technology stack for you. And that's this project fee. You can start monetizing and moving yourself up that value chain curve.
But what's interesting is the fact that, I've been, as I mentioned, in the sector now for 2 decades. And the holy grail of outsourcing and BPO has always been value add services, professional services. We keep hearing about it, but I see very few outsourcers really making the investment in time and resource to make it happen. And the few that have done it, I think have done exceptionally well. And they've been able to monetize a lot of those different elements of value add. But as you referenced that shiny ball syndrome, like when you said that, I thought about like a pinball bouncing around. And it's like a bunch of little kids, 6 and 7-year-olds on a soccer field, everybody going after the same ball.
Yes.
There's no vision if you were to actually play a little bit more strategically and think about how you can make those professional services and value add happen, it changes the ball game entirely.
Yes, yes. And especially if you're you kind of are able to step back and say, okay, we did it, maybe we did it for this client for free. We proved out we know the process. We figured out what the gains are going to be from it. We figured out how long it'll take on our side. Now I can price it as a project. Now I can start testing this with other clients to say, is this the right price point? Okay, they pushed back or they said yes too eagerly. Okay, that's too low. Now I can go back in. But you don't get those learnings when all of your clients look completely different. It's so hard to separate the noise, like the data from the noise, when you have too many data points, really. And so that's one of the additional benefits of specializing and having similar looking clients, is that you're going to be solving one problem over and over and over again. And so you'll be really good at it. And that's how I want to see BPOs start being able to charge beyond just hours. I want them to be charging on outcomes. I want them to be charging on the real value they're delivering to their clients. And so that's part of what we help with as well.
Super duper. So Amanda, last question for you. If any of our listeners want to find you or get a hold of you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, great question. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on my website, quinngrowthadvisors.com. I would love to chat with you about how we can evolve your BPO and take it into the 21st century.
Well, this has been a great chat. Amanda, you are a first-time guest, but definitely not a last-time one. So thanks for taking the time to join us on the CX Files today.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.